Foundation cracks, the winter light filtered through the tall windows of Riverside High's cafeteria, casting long shadows across the crowded tables. Nora Bennett sat alone at her usual spot near the back wall, surrounded by architectural sketches and half-finished homework. Her worn sketchbook was filled with intricate drawings of buildings she dreamed of designing someday: soaring towers, elegant bridges, homes that could shelter families for generations. She glanced up from her pencil work and immediately felt her heart skip. Marcus Rivera was laughing with his teammates at the center table, his dark hair catching the light as he gestured animatedly about last night's basketball game. Even from across the room, his presence seemed to fill the space. He was everything Nora wasn't: confident, popular, surrounded by friends who hung on his every word. For months, she'd been building up the courage to talk to him. It shared advanced calculus class since freshman year, and she'd noticed how he actually paid attention during lectures, how he helped struggling classmates without making them feel stupid. Behind the popular facade, she sensed something deeper, something real. Today was the day. The winter formal was 3 weeks away, and if she didn't ask him now, she never would. Nora closed her sketchbook with trembling fingers and stood up. The walk across the cafeteria felt like crossing a construction site without safety equipment, every step dangerous, every breath calculated. Students at nearby tables began to notice her unusual trajectory, whispers following in her wake. "Marcus." Her voice came out smaller than intended. He looked up from his lunch, eyebrows raised in mild surprise. His friends Brock, Tyler, and Cameron immediately fell silent, creating an audience she hadn't anticipated. "Oh hey, Nora, right? From calc class." Marcus's tone was friendly enough, but she could sense the shift in atmosphere around the table. "Yes, that's right." She clutched her sketchbook tighter. "I was wondering if you might want to go to winter formal with me." The words hung in the air like a poorly designed structure, unstable, vulnerable to collapse. Marcus's expression changed, a flicker of something passing across his features. His friends exchanged glances, barely contained smirks playing at the corners of their mouths. "That's really sweet of you to ask," Marcus said, his voice carrying that particular tone people used when delivering bad news gently. "But honestly, Nora, you should probably stick to your blueprints and building designs. I mean, you're great at that stuff. But dating, that's more of a real-world thing, you know? You're just not really my type." The laughter started with Brock, a sharp, cruel sound that seemed to echo off the cafeteria walls. Tyler joined in, then Cameron, and within seconds, surrounding tables had picked up on the entertainment. Marcus didn't laugh, but he didn't stop them either. He just looked at her with something that might have been pity. "Sorry," he added, as if that single word could rebuild what he'd just demolished. Nora felt heat creep up her neck. Her carefully constructed confidence crumbling like a building without proper foundation. The architectural sketches in her hands suddenly felt like evidence of her inadequacy, proof that she belonged in a world of drawings and measurements, not real human connections. "Of course," she managed to whisper, "I understand." She turned and walked back to her table with as much dignity as she could salvage, each step feeling like a mile. Behind her, she could hear the continued murmurs and occasional bursts of laughter. By tomorrow, the story would have spread through the entire school. That night, alone in her bedroom surrounded by her architectural books and sketches, Nora made a promise to herself. She would never again let someone else define what she was capable of building, whether it was structures of steel and stone, or life of her own design. She opened her sketchbook to a fresh page and began drawing the most ambitious building she'd ever imagined. Blueprint for Success. 12 years had transformed Nora Bennett in ways that even she sometimes found hard to believe. The shy teenager who once sketched buildings in cafeteria corners had become the CEO of Bennett Architecture and Development, one of Seattle's most innovative firms. Her corner office on the 40th floor offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, where 3 of her design buildings now stood as testaments to her vision and determination. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows as Nora reviewed applications for their newest project, the Aurora Grand, a luxury hotel that would redefine Seattle's waterfront district. Her assistant Jennifer had narrowed down hundreds of applications to a manageable stack of potential project managers. Each candidate represented years of experience, advanced degrees, and impressive portfolios. The final interviews are scheduled. For next week, Jennifer announced, placing a steaming cup of coffee on Nora's glass desk. I've arranged them in order of qualifications, with the most experienced candidates first. Nora nodded, her attention focused on the detailed project. Timelines spread across her monitor. The Aurora Grand wasn't just another building, it was her masterpiece. 40-story testament to sustainable luxury that would house everything from high-end suites to affordable artist residencies. Every detail mattered, every decision carried. Wait. She reached for the application stack, her manicured fingers flipping through resumes with practiced efficiency. Harvard MBA, Stanford engineering degree, 15 years with major construction firms. The credentials blurred together until one particular resume made her pause. Marcus Rivera, project management specialist. The name triggered something in her. Memory, but she couldn't place it immediately. She studied his qualifications, 10 years of experience, mostly with smaller firms, a degree from University of Washington. His portfolio showed competent work, nothing spectacular, but solid, reliable projects. What caught her attention was a gap in his employment history over the past 2 years. With only sporadic freelance work listed, it wasn't until she reached the attached photograph that recognition hit her like a collapsing structure. Those same dark eyes that had looked at her with pity 12 years ago now stared back from a professional headshot. His face was leaner now, marked by lines that spoke of struggle and setbacks, but it was unmistakably him. Marcus Rivera, the golden boy of Riverside High, the basketball star who had crushed her teenage dreams with casual cruelty. Nora set the resume down carefully, her expression unchanged despite the sudden acceleration of her heartbeat. She had learned long ago to control her reactions, to never let emotions compromise her professional judgment. But seeing his face again brought back memories. She thought she had buried beneath years of success and achievement. She picked up his resume again, reading more carefully this time. His recent work history told a story of declined projects growing smaller, gaps growing longer, references from increasingly modest firms. The confident boy who had once dismissed her as not worth his time was now applying for a mid-level position at her company, desperate enough to work for someone he had once considered beneath his notice. A different kind of person might have felt vindicated, might have savored the irony of the situation. But Nora had learned that success wasn't about revenge. It was about building something meaningful, something that lasted. Still, she couldn't deny the flutter of curiosity about what had brought Marcus Rivera to this point. She buzzed Jennifer through the intercom, add Marcus Rivera to the interview schedule, put him at the end of next week. The construction specialist. From the U, Jennifer's voice carried a note of surprise. What? His qualifications are adequate, but hardly impressive compared to the other candidates. Sometimes the most interesting buildings come from unexpected blueprints, Nora replied, returning her attention to the project plans. Schedule him for Friday afternoon. As Jennifer's footsteps faded down the hallway, Nora allowed herself a moment to process the strange turn of events. She had built her empire on the principle that everyone deserved a chance to prove their worth, regardless of background or circumstances. She had hired single mothers, ex-convicts, and college dropouts who had gone on to become some of her most valuable employees. But Marcus Rivera wasn't just another candidate seeking redemption. He was a ghost from her past, a reminder of the girl she used to be before she learned to build walls around her heart as expertly as she designed them for her buildings. She wondered if he would even remember her. The quiet girl from calculus class, the one who had dared to ask him to winter formal, only to be dismissed as someone who belonged in the world of blueprints rather than reality. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had indeed stuck to her blueprints. They had carried her far beyond anything Marcus had achieved. The question now was whether she would let the past influence her decision, or if she would judge him purely on his merits as a candidate. Professional integrity demanded the latter, but human nature whispered reminders of that day in the cafeteria. of the laughter that had followed her back to her table, of the promise she had made to herself that night. Nora turned back to her computer, pulling up the architectural plans for the Aurora Grand. Whatever happened in that interview room, she would handle it with the same precision and professionalism she brought to every aspect of her business. After all, she had learned long ago that the strongest foundations were built not on emotion, but on careful planning and unwavering resolve. Structural assessment. The reception area of Bennett Architecture and Development hummed with quiet efficiency. All polished marble surfaces and strategically placed greenery that spoke of success without ostentation. Marcus Rivera sat in one of the leather chairs, his palms slightly damp despite his attempts to project confidence. His best suit, a navy blue number he'd purchased 3 years ago during more prosperous times, felt looser than it used to. A reminder of the lean months that had brought him to this point. He studied the portfolio in his lap one more time. Though he had memorized every project, every detail, every carefully crafted sentence designed to mask the gaps in his recent work history. Truth was harder to package. His family's construction business had collapsed when his father made a series of poor investments, taking Marcus's comfortable position as heir apparent with it. The basketball injury that ended his college career had been just the beginning of a long slide from golden boy to struggling contractor. Mr. Rivera, a young woman in a crisp blazer, approached with a professional smile. Ms. Bennett will see you now. Marcus followed her down a hallway lined with architectural photographs, buildings that seemed to defy gravity with their innovative designs. Bridges that looked like sculptures, housing developments that somehow managed to feel both modern and welcoming. Bennett Architecture had clearly made its mark on Seattle's skyline. The conference room door opened, and Marcus stepped inside to find himself face to face with his interviewer. For a moment, his carefully prepared introduction died in his throat. The woman rising from her chair bore little resemblance to the quiet girl he remembered from high school. Her auburn hair was styled in a sleek bob that framed sharp cheekbones, and her tailored dress spoke of success and authority. But it was her eyes that stopped him, intelligent, assessing, and completely unreadable. "Good afternoon, Mr. Rivera. I'm Nora Bennett." She extended her hand with practiced professionalism, giving no indication that she recognized him. "Please, have a seat." Marcus shook her hand, noting the firmness of her grip, the confidence in her bearing. "Thank you for this opportunity, Ms. Bennett. I'm excited to discuss how I might contribute to your team." "Let's start with your recent work history," Nora said, settling back into her chair with his resume in front of her. "I noticed some gaps in your employment over the past 2 years. Can you walk me through that period?" The question he had been dreading asked with the directness he remembered from their calculus class, though back then he hadn't paid enough attention to appreciate her sharp mind. Marcus chose his words carefully. "My family's business encountered some financial difficulties," he said. "I spent time trying to keep it afloat, taking on smaller projects, learning every aspect of construction management from the ground up. When it became clear that wasn't sustainable, I made the decision to seek opportunities with more established firms." Nora nodded, making notes on her tablet. "Tell me about the Riverside Community Center renovation. That seems to be your most substantial recent project." Marcus felt a spark of pride finally, something he could discuss with genuine enthusiasm. "That project was particularly meaningful to me. The community center was built in the 1970s and needed significant structural updates to meet current codes while preserving its historical character. I worked closely with local residents to understand their needs and coordinated with city planners to ensure the renovation would serve the community for decades to come." "Interesting approach," Nora observed. "Community input can often complicate project timelines. How did you balance stakeholder concerns with budget and schedule constraints?" For the next hour, Nora grilled him with questions that revealed a deep understanding of project management, construction challenges, and the delicate balance between vision and practicality. Marcus found himself genuinely engaged, discussing problems he had solved, mistakes he had learned from, and innovations he had implemented with limited resources. What struck him most was how thoroughly prepared she was, how every question built on the previous answer, creating a complete picture of his capabilities and experience. This wasn't a courtesy interview. She was evaluating him with the same rigor he imagined she applied to her architectural designs. "Let's talk about the Aurora Grand project specifically," Nora said, pulling up detailed plans on her tablet. "This will be a complex build with multiple stakeholders, tight timelines, and significant public visibility. What would be your approach to managing a project of this scope?" Marcus studied the plans she showed him, impressed, despite himself, by the ambitious design. The building seemed to flow upward like water frozen in motion, its facade incorporating sustainable elements that would make it a landmark of environmental innovation. "The key would be establishing clear communication channels from day one," he said thoughtfully. "With a project this complex, information breakdowns can cascade into major delays and cost overruns. I'd implement daily progress reports, weekly stakeholder meetings, and monthly milestone reviews. But beyond the logistics, a project like this requires understanding that you're not just building a hotel, you're creating a piece of the city's identity." Something flickered in Nora's expression. Approval, perhaps a recognition of a deeper understanding she hadn't expected to find. "You sound passionate about architecture," she observed. "That's not always the case with project managers." Marcus hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I've always been drawn to buildings that serve a purpose beyond just occupying space, structures that bring communities together, that solve problems while creating beauty. I suppose that's why I'm particularly interested in working with Bennett. Architecture, your designs seem to embody that philosophy." The interview continued for another 30 minutes, covering everything from budget management to crisis resolution. Through it all, Marcus found himself studying Nora, trying to reconcile this accomplished professional with the quiet girl who had once asked him to winter formal. Had she really not recognized him, or was she simply too professional to let personal history interfere with business? Finally, Nora closed her tablet and leaned back in her chair. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Rivera. We'll be making our decision." By early next week, Marcus stood, extending his hand again. "Thank you for the opportunity. I hope to hear from you soon." As he walked toward the door, Nora's voice stopped him. "Mr. Rivera?" He turned back, noting something different in her tone, warmer perhaps, or touched with an emotion he couldn't identify. "Welcome to the team. Jennifer will have your paperwork ready Monday morning." Marcus stared at her in surprise. "Thank you. I won't let you down." "I'm sure you won't," Nora replied, and for just a moment, her professional mask slipped enough to reveal something that might have been hope. As the door closed behind him, Marcus stood in the hallway trying to process what had just happened. He had a job, good job, with a company that could resurrect his career. But more than that, he had been given a second chance by someone who had every reason to turn him away. The question was whether Nora Bennett remembered their past. If so, what her decision to hire him really meant. Renovation 3 months into the Aurora Grand project, Marcus had settled into a rhythm that surprised him with its satisfaction. Every morning he arrived at the construction site as the sun painted Seattle's skyline in shades of gold and rose. Reviewing overnight progress reports and coordinating with the various teams that would transform Nora's vision into reality, the project was proceeding ahead of schedule. It's a fact that had earned him respectful nods from subcontractors and grudging approval from the most senior architects. More importantly, it had given him regular opportunities to work alongside Nora, observing the passionate precision with which she approached every aspect of the build. She was nothing like he had expected, or perhaps nothing like he had been capable of seeing 12 years ago, where he remembered a quiet, awkward teenager. He now worked with a woman who commanded respect through competence rather than intimidation, who remembered the names of every construction worker and asked about their families with genuine interest. This morning, Marcus found her on the 15th floor, crouched beside a window frame with the head electrician, discussing the integration of smart lighting systems. Her hard hat sat slightly askew, and there was a smudge of concrete dust on her cheek that she seemed oblivious to. "The sensors need to be positioned to catch natural light changes without interfering with the view," she was explaining, tracing connections on her tablet. "Can we run the wiring through the ceiling cavity instead?" The electrician, a gruff man named Pete, who had worked construction for 30 years, nodded thoughtfully. "It'll add maybe half a day to the timeline, but Yeah, we can make that work. Smart thinking, boss. Marcus watched the interaction with growing admiration. In his experience, architects often designed in isolation, leaving practical considerations to project managers and contractors. But Nora was different. She understood that great buildings required collaboration at every level. "Morning, Marcus," she said, noticing his approach. "Wait. Pete and I were just solving the eternal battle between form and function. How's form doing in this round?" Marcus asked, accepting the coffee Pete handed him from a thermos. "Winning, as usual." Pete chuckled. "Your boss here has a way of making the impossible seem merely challenging." As Pete moved on to consult with his crew, Marcus and Nora walked the perimeter of the floor, checking progress against the detailed timeline Marcus maintained on his tablet. It had become their daily routine, these morning inspections that served as much for planning as for the comfortable conversation that had developed between them. "I wanted to thank you for the community input sessions you suggested," Nora said, pausing at a window that framed the Seattle waterfront. "The feedback from local residents has been invaluable, especially regarding the affordable housing units." Marcus had proposed the sessions after noticing tension between the construction crews and neighboring residents. By creating formal opportunities for community input, they had transformed potential opposition into genuine support for the project. "It seemed like the right thing to do," Marcus replied. "Buildings should serve the people who live around them, not just the people who can afford to stay in them." Nora turned to study him, her expression thoughtful. "That's an interesting philosophy for someone in commercial development. I suppose I've learned that success isn't just about profit margins," Marcus said, surprised by his own honesty. "The projects I'm most proud of are the ones that actually improve people's lives." They continued their walk in comfortable silence. But Marcus sensed a shift in Nora's demeanor, thoughtfulness that suggested she was seeing him differently than she had before. It was a change he welcomed, though he still wasn't entirely sure whether she remembered their shared history. Over the following weeks, their professional relationship began to develop personal dimensions. Nora started inviting Marcus to client dinners where his practical insights complemented her visionary presentations. He found himself staying late to review plans with her, their conversations extending beyond construction schedules to discussions of architecture, philosophy, urban planning, and the role of buildings in creating community. One evening in early October, as they worked late on material selections for the hotel's lobby, Marcus discovered something that shifted his understanding of who Nora Bennett really was. "I need to make a quick call," Nora said, stepping away from their table covered in marble samples and fabric swatches. Marcus continued reviewing specifications until he overheard her conversation. "Mrs. Johnson, it's Nora Bennett. Now please don't worry about the rent this month. I heard about your husband's accident. Of course, take the time you need. Actually, I think there might be a position for him in our maintenance department once he's recovered. You could use someone with his electrical background." Marcus looked up to see Nora through the glass wall of the conference room, her voice warm with genuine concern. After she ended the call, he waited for her to return. "That was kind of you," he said quietly. Nora shrugged, but he caught the slight flush in her cheeks. "Mrs. Johnson lives in one of the apartment buildings I renovated 3 years ago. Her husband was injured in a construction accident. Not one of our sites, and they're struggling with medical bills. You own residential properties too?" "Few buildings in neighborhoods that needed investment," Nora admitted. "I keep the rents affordable and maintain the properties properly. It's not the most profitable part of my business, but..." She trailed off, as if realizing she was revealing more than she intended. Marcus found himself studying her with new eyes. The successful architect, the demanding boss, the visionary developer, none of those titles captured the complete picture of who Nora Bennett had become. She was someone who used her success to lift others up, who remembered what it felt like to be dismissed, and had chosen to respond with inclusion rather than exclusion. "That's remarkable," he said, and meant it. "It's just good business," Nora replied, but her tone suggested it was much more than that. As October progressed into November, Marcus began to realize that his feelings for Nora were evolving far beyond professional respect. He found himself looking forward to their daily meetings, staying later just to extend their conversations. volunteering for weekend site inspections that he knew she would attend. But with that growing attraction came the weight of their past. The knowledge that he had once dismissed her as not worth his time. He had been young and stupid and cruel, but those weren't excuses. They were simply facts he would have to live with. The question that kept him awake at night was whether he deserved a chance to show her who he had become, or if his past actions had permanently disqualified him from her consideration. The answer would come sooner than he expected. On a rain-soaked evening in late November, when a crisis at the construction site would force both of them to confront not just the challenges of building the Aurora Grand, but the more complex architecture of human relationships and second chances. New construction. The call came at 11:30 on a Thursday night in late November, jarring Marcus from restless sleep. Heavy rains had been battering Seattle for 3 days, and his first thought was flooding. Construction sites were vulnerable to water damage, especially during the foundation stages. "Marcus, we have a problem." Nora's voice was tight with controlled tension. "The storm drain system backing up has caused flooding in the lower levels." "I'm heading to the site now." Marcus was already reaching for clothes. "I'll meet you there in 20 minutes. The Aurora Grand construction site looked like a disaster zone in the harsh glare of emergency lighting. Water had breached the temporary barriers, flooding the parking garage excavation and threatening the newly poured foundation supports. City engineers and emergency crews worked alongside Bennett architecture staff to assess the damage and coordinate pumping operations. Marcus found Nora standing knee-deep in muddy water, directing the placement of additional pumps while consulting with the structural engineer about potential foundation damage. Her usually pristine professional appearance was replaced by work boots, waterproof gear, the kind of focused determination that reminded him why her company had built such a strong reputation. "How bad is it?" he asked, wading over to join. Her consultation with the engineer could have been worse, the engineer replied. "The foundation supports are intact, but we'll need to completely redo the waterproofing and drainage systems. We're looking at maybe a 3-week delay minimum." Marcus felt his heart sink. Delays meant cost overruns, disappointed investors, potential contract penalties. More importantly, it meant months of additional work for Nora, whose reputation was tied to this project's success. "What if we approach it differently?" he said, studying the flooded area with new eyes. "Instead of fighting the water, what if we work with it?" Both Nora and the engineer turned to him with questioning looks. The original design included decorative water features in the lobby level, Marcus continued, his mind racing through possibilities. "What if we expand that concept? Create a controlled water management system that turns this drainage issue into an architectural feature?" Nora's eyes widened with understanding. "A bioremediation system. Natural filtering through designed wetlands in the lower level with the water feature as the visible component upstairs." Exactly. It would actually improve the building's environmental rating, provide natural temperature control, and turn our biggest problem into our most innovative feature. The engineer looked skeptical. Marcus could see excitement building in Nora's expression. The same look he'd noticed whenever she encountered a challenging design problem. They worked through the night, sketching modifications on water-stained tablets, consulting with environmental engineers by phone, coordinating with city planners who would need to approve the drainage modifications. By dawn, they had developed a preliminary plan that would not only solve their immediate crisis, but enhance the building's design in ways the original blueprint hadn't imagined. As the sun rose over Seattle's skyline, painting the sky in soft pastels that reflected off the standing water, Marcus and Nora found themselves alone on the construction platform, sharing coffee from a thermos one of the workers had left behind. "This could actually work," Nora said, reviewing their rough sketches in the morning light. "It's ambitious, maybe a little crazy, but it could work. Sometimes the best solutions come from the worst problems," Marcus replied, then paused. Realizing the broader truth in his own words, Nora looked at him curiously, and Marcus felt the weight of everything unsaid between them. 3 months of working together, of growing respect and cautious friendship, of feelings he wasn't sure he had the right to express. The crisis had stripped away professional pretenses, leaving them both raw and honest in ways that office meetings never allowed. "Nora," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." She set down her coffee cup, her expression becoming guarded in a way that suggested she knew what was coming. "I know we went to high school together," he continued, "and I remember you asking." "Me too," Winter formal, "and I remember what I said to you."
Wow.
"What I did to you." Nora's face remained neutral, but he caught the slight tensing of her shoulders. "I was 18 and stupid and cruel," Marcus said, the words feeling inadequate even as he spoke them. "I thought popularity and status were the most important things in the world, and I hurt someone who had never done anything but show me kindness. I've regretted it every day since." "Have you?" Nora's voice was quiet, controlled. "Yes. But not just because of what it says about who I was then, because of who I lost the chance to know. Working with you these past months, seeing your intelligence, your compassion, the way you treat everyone with respect, regardless of their position. I realize I was too immature to recognize your worth back then, but I'm not that person anymore." Was silent for a long moment, watching the construction crews begin their morning routines below them. "I hired you because I wanted to see if people can really change," she said finally. "I've spent 12 years building a company based on giving people second chances, hiring single mothers, college dropouts, who everyone else had written off. But you were different. You were someone who had hurt me personally, and I wanted to know if my principles would hold when it was personal." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You've exceeded every expectation," Nora said, turning to face him fully. "Your work has been exemplary, your ideas innovative, your treatment of the construction crews respectful and collaborative. You've shown me exactly the kind of person you've become." She paused, and Marcus held his breath. "But more than that, you've shown me that I was right to take the risk. That sometimes giving someone a second chance isn't just about them, about refusing to let past hurt define your capacity for hope." Marcus stared at her, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "I've been falling for you too," Nora admitted, her professional composure finally cracking to reveal something vulnerable and real. "Fighting it, questioning it, wondering if I was being foolish to trust someone who had hurt me before. Watching. You work seeing how you treat people, recognizing that you've become someone worth admiring. Realize that holding on to past pain was just another way of letting you define my worth." The morning sun had grown stronger, burning off the mist that had hung over the construction site and revealing the skyline of the city they were helping to reshape. Marcus reached for Nora's hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. "I don't deserve a second chance," he said honestly. "But if you're willing to give me one, I promise I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of it." Nora smiled then, the first genuinely warm smile she had given him since he'd walked into her office 3 months ago. "We're architects, Marcus. We know better than anyone that the strongest structures are built on solid foundations. With careful planning and quality materials, whatever we build together, we'll build it right." 6 months later, the Aurora Grand opened to international acclaim. Its innovative bioremediation system featured in architectural magazines around the world. But for Marcus and Nora, standing together on the hotel's rooftop garden in Seattle, sparkled below them. The building's success was secondary to the more personal construction project they had undertaken, the careful, deliberate building of trust, forgiveness, and love on the foundation of second chances and hard-won wisdom. They had both learned that the most beautiful structures often rose from the most challenging sites, and that sometimes the best blueprints were drawn, not in spite of past mistakes, but because of the lessons those mistakes had taught them about what really mattered in the architecture of a life well lived.